Welcome to the Restricted Handling Daily Intel Brief. This is what's been going on in Iran and the Middle East in the past 24 hours. President Trump announced Saturday that he canceled planned strikes against Iran after Iran and several Gulf partners pushed for more time to pursue a deal. According to Trump, the outlines of an agreement had emerged that would reopen the Strait of Hormuz and address Iran's nuclear ambitions. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates were reportedly among the countries urging Washington to step back from another round of attacks because they feared the consequences of a wider regional war. But here is where things get interesting. The public messaging coming out of Washington and Tehran looks like two completely different movies playing on the same screen. Trump said negotiations would begin Monday. Iran's foreign ministry pushed back and said there were no direct talks underway with the United States. Iranian officials said the only active discussions involved Oman and a possible arrangement for maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. And that strait is really the heart of this entire crisis. This is not simply about a nuclear agreement. This is about who controls one of the most important economic choke points on the planet. Before the war, roughly a fifth of global oil and liquefied natural gas shipments passed through Hormuz. Iran has spent months proving it can create enormous economic pain without needing to defeat the U.S. military in a traditional sense. Tehran's strategy has been to make the cost of confrontation higher for everyone else. The Iranian position is that it should have a role in managing traffic through the waterway, potentially controlling access and collecting fees. The U.S. position is that Hormuz must remain an international waterway and cannot become an Iranian-controlled toll booth for global energy. That disagreement is why these negotiations are so difficult. The fight is not just about opening a shipping lane, it is about the future security architecture of the Gulf. Inside Iran, there also appears to be a split between officials who want a negotiated outcome and hardline factions that believe Tehran's pressure campaign is working. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and President Masoud Pezeshkian have emphasized diplomacy and the economic costs of continued conflict. But elements connected to the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, particularly the faction associated with Commander Major General Ahmad Vahidi, appear far less willing to surrender influence over Hormuz. The hardliners' argument is simple. Iran has leverage, and they do not want to give it away, and Tehran has been expanding that leverage beyond the Persian Gulf. One of the biggest developments is the return of Yemen's Houthi movement as an active player in the conflict. For months, the Houthis stayed relatively quiet while Iran absorbed pressure from the US and Israel. That changed when the group began targeting Saudi-linked shipping and energy infrastructure. The Houthis announced a blockade against Saudi vessels in the Red Sea and claimed attacks against Saudi oil facilities, including areas around Jazan and Yanbu. Those locations matter because Saudi Arabia has increasingly relied on its western coastline as an alternative route for exporting energy while Hormuz remains disrupted. This is classic Iranian asymmetric strategy. Tehran does not need to defeat Saudi Arabia, the U.S. Navy, or the broader coalition militarily. It just needs to create enough uncertainty that insurance costs rise, shipping slows, investors get nervous, and governments start asking whether continued pressure is worth the price. It is a strategy built around friction, and it is working well enough that Gulf states are pushing hard for de-escalation. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has been one of the strongest voices urging restraint. Riyadh understands the danger better than almost anyone. Saudi Arabia is sitting in the middle of this conflict, with Iranian pressure from the east, Houthi pressure from the south, and American military forces operating from bases inside the kingdom. A broader war could threaten the very economic transformation Saudi Arabia is trying to build through its Vision 2030 program. The U.S. military is also facing difficult choices. Officials have raised concerns about the strain on defensive weapons inventories, especially systems used to intercept drones and missiles. The concern is not only about the current conflict. It is about what prolonged Middle East operations could mean for U.S. readiness in a future major power crisis. That is the strategic dilemma facing Washington. Military power can punish Iran, but it has not yet solved the central problem. Iran's ability to disrupt energy markets and regional stability. Meanwhile, Iran has used pauses in fighting to rebuild military capabilities. Iranian officials said they used previous ceasefire periods to repair systems, produce new equipment, and import additional capabilities. Tehran reportedly introduced an upgraded Hadid 110 drone during recent operations, a system designed to fly faster and lower, making detection and interception more difficult. The significance is less about one individual weapon and more about the broader lesson. Iran is showing that even under pressure, it can regenerate military capacity and continue creating problems for adversaries. The conflict is also creating pressure in other parts of the region. Jordan has become increasingly uncomfortable as Iranian attacks have moved closer to its territory. The country hosts important U.S. military facilities and has faced repeated drone and missile threats. A July 17th attack on U.S. military sites in Jordan that killed 3 American service members highlighted the risks for Washington's partners. In Gaza, another diplomatic effort is facing major obstacles. Hamas agreed to a framework requiring the group to disarm, store heavy weapons, and transfer authority to a Palestinian technocratic committee. But implementation remains the giant question mark. Israel remains deeply skeptical that Hamas will actually surrender its military capabilities, and Israeli strikes in Gaza continued even after the announcement. So across the region, the same theme keeps appearing. Agreements are being discussed, but the underlying power struggles remain. The U.S. and Iran are testing each other's willingness to absorb pressure. Gulf states are trying to prevent a war that could devastate energy markets. Iran is trying to prove it can impose costs far beyond its borders. And everyone is watching to see whether diplomacy can actually produce something durable, or whether this is simply another pause before the next escalation. That's all for today. Be good to one another, keep your critical thinking switched on, and remember, powerful people can survive a little scrutiny. Find the Daily Brief at restrictedhandling.substack.com.